Okay, all right. So here we are. And I have a guest, Carl Bernstein, today. How are you?
Are you talking to me?
You talking to me? Well, then who the hell else are you talking to? Talking to me? Well, I'm the only one here.
I'm fine.
Might as
Thank you
well.
very much.
I don't think Barbara can hear us that well. Barb, can you hear us?
Hey, Carl,
I can hear that. Nice to hear your voice.
for joining us on the Cloud Nine Happy Train.
Yep, we're unleashed on Cloud 9. Okay, Carl, so how are you today?
So far, so good. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us. All right, so I showed you today, I actually found your 1964 University of Michigan Law School graduation photo,
Yes, you did.
and you were quite the handsome man.
Well, thank you so much. It was a mere 60 years ago.
I know, and it says underneath, it says your address, so you were from Brooklyn.
Correct. 1000 Avenue H, Brooklyn 30, New York.
Brooklyn's in the house.
And can you tell us, what was Brooklyn like back, in the...
It was interesting. It was quite different. The neighborhood that I grew up in was 50% Jewish, 50% Catholic. I didn't meet a Protestant until I actually got out to the University of Michigan in 1956, 17 years after I was born. And the thing that was interesting was I went to a public school, PS 217, which was pretty much half Jewish, half Italian Catholic in those days.
Oh,
When we went to high school, it was virtually 100% Jewish because the Italian kids tended to go to Catholic high schools in the neighborhood, like St. Rose of Lima. But it was a wonderful neighborhood. People lived there for long periods of time. Kids were able to run outside and play without worrying about being kidnapped and sold. We had, 40 or 50 kids my age, all of whom we got along, fairly well together. We all went to school. And we really enjoyed life. It was just a very different experience. The movie theater, the Kent Theater around the corner, was 14 cents on weekends, 9 cents during the week. We used to go to Joy Fong's for Chinese food, 65 cents for lunch. And my parents would take me to the world's largest restaurant at Sheepshead Bay almost every Sunday for many years, FWIL Lundy's.
Okay. I mean, Brooklyn's beautiful today as it is. Last year I just walked the Brooklyn Bridge and I was amazed how just beautiful.
Well, the part where you walked, you would come out in Brooklyn Heights, which when I was a kid was a completely different area, much wealthier area. Did have Protestant churches there, like St. Anne's Episcopal Church. Totally different than the neighborhood. I grew up in what's called the Midwood section of Brooklyn, which had a lot of religious schools, St. Rose of Lima, the Yeshiva of Flatbush. They had synagogues, they had churches, but nothing Protestant. It was just a different experience.
So did you go to synagogue? Was your family religious?
My father's family were virtually totally atheistic. His father, who came from Russia in the 1890s, just didn't believe. My mother came from a very Orthodox family, and I started at the Yeshiva of Flatbush, which was located on Coney Island Avenue between Avenue I and Avenue J. I went there for kindergarten, went there for first grade, and they kicked me out after the second grade for conduct unbecoming because I hated the place. We used to go to school from 8:15 until 4:15 with two 15-minute play periods. So my buddy, Eddie Silver, and I would run away all the time. Joel Brofferman.
In second grade, you would run away?
Yes. Joel Braverman, who was the principal, used to spank the living daylights out of me and Eddie. And finally, at the end of the second grade, I refused to go to synagogue on Saturdays. I wanted to play ball with my buddies. I wasn't interested in wearing tzitzis, wearing a yarmulke, having to lay phylacteries around my arm. I was more interested in playing basketball, handball, stickball, punchball, baseball against the wall, slap ball, hit the penny, flip the cards, which were things that I found fascinating.
So when you were in second grade, when you ran away, where would you run away to?
We'd run away to a playground where we could play ball.
Okay. And did they find you? I mean,
Sure.
they had to come look for you.
I was only 8 years old. It's not like I was, planning to get into a car and drive.
Wow. So you were advanced at 8 years old.
Excuse me. Where did I go to college? Of course I was advanced.
You were a New York City
Kid.
kid. Yeah.
I just hated the place. Anyway.
So where did you go to college now that you bring it up?
Oh, let me think about it. Oh, the University of Michigan. '52, then from Midwood High School in 1956. And when I was 16, turning 17 when I graduated.
So the religion was out the window at this point.
Totally out the window.
After eight and up.
No. When I was about 10, I read about the Holocaust. And once I read about the Holocaust and realized that 6 million of my co-religionists had died because they were Jewish, I never believed in God again. It was simply something that was way out of my comfort zone. So it was nothing which I had any interest one way or the other.
How did your mother feel about that?
I was bar mitzvahed. I agreed to be bar mitzvahed because her family was Orthodox. So my ceremony took 4 hours. I read from the Torah, recited all the prayers, did what had to be done, and that was essentially the last time I went back.
And do you have any siblings?
My baby brother, who is turning 83, is a sibling of mine whom I love. He also went to Michigan. He got his doctorate in both English and psychology, has written 4 books. He's working on his 4th book as we speak, and still has a very active practice. A great kid who lives in Manhattan and has a place in Norwich, Connecticut, a weekend place.
Did he go through the system that your mom, like the religious
He did.
school system?
He went to the yeshiva through the 6th grade and could read and write Hebrew quite fluently. So he studied it in college, where, of course, he got all A's. And he also went to Midwood High School and then went to Michigan.
Okay. Good. And your dad went to Michigan, too, didn't he?
The story for that, which I think is fascinating, his family came here in the 1890s. He was born in 1901 on East Houston Street in Manhattan. When he was young, they moved to Brownsville. His father who had a 4th grade education, was a successful house painter.
So his father came over from Russia?
From Russia, and his mother from Poland. Okay. And I don't know which grade school he went to, but I know he went to Boys High, graduated in 1918, graduated from City College in 1922 with a straight A average, having majored in biology. I've seen his transcript. It is quite impressive. So he was rejected at every medical school he applied to, except the University of Michigan.
Why do you think that was?
Because he was Jewish.
Okay.
In his graduating class from medical school, 10 Jews, 7 women, 1 black, and 2 Asians in 1926.
So the schools that he applied to, what were they, do you know?
Yes, I know exactly. Harvard, Yale, Columbia, the University of Pennsylvania, and the University of Michigan Medical School.
And every single one rejected him.
Correct.
Because he was Jewish.
Well, that's they didn't write a letter
well,
saying.
that's actually historic. Like
Correct.
That is written in word on paper. That a lot of they call it the Harvard of the West, right?
They do.
Michigan, because a lot of the Jewish people.
We call Harvard the Michigan of the East, but that's all right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so when it was time for me to go to college, I had no choice. I said, "What do you think, Pop?" He said, "Son, you're going to the University of Michigan." When I arrived there in September of 1956.
Now, was it different then?
Yes. It's just that my dad was really grateful to Michigan and wanted me to go there. So what did I know? I'm 16. I said, fine.
Good choice. So did you drive out there? How did you get there?
No, in those days, there were no jet planes. It was a 6-hour flight from New York. Now it's about an hour and 10 minutes. It was a 6-hour flight from New York to, there wasn't even Detroit Metro then.
Wait, what kind of planes were there?
Prop planes, with propellers. But they were going against the wind.
Could they seat in a plane?
Oh, I don't know. It was regular. The answer is I don't know.
Size?
But it was regular size. I mean, it was a regular plane, 4 engine, 4 propellers. But it just took forever. And I got off, and I get in a cab, and 20 minutes and $4 later, the guy dumps me off in front of West Quadrangle, and that was my introduction to the University of Michigan.
Yeah, that's how it was back then.
It sure was.
It wasn't.
Yes.
No one was holding your hand.
Correct. There was. It's not like when we had our daughter, we took her to 30 different schools. You make up. As it happened, she went to Michigan as well. But
yeah. And so, what was the university like at that time?
There weren't. It was virtually all white, is my recollection. There were some blacks, but it was virtually all white. Very few blacks, Hispanics. In fact, I don't know Hispanics. There were Asians who were there. Now I'm talking about the undergraduate school. When I got to the law school, we had 346 white males and 4 women in my class.
Wait, say that again.
We had 346 white males and 4 women.
Okay.
And there were no blacks, no Hispanics, no Asians that I remember. Now it's over 50% female.
And how was it for the women back then? Was it tough being in?
I would assume so. I had really no contact with them.
Were the men polite to the women in the
Yes.
class? Did they respect them?
Yes, very much so. That was never, after all, we were all graduate students. Mm-hmm. If you got in, it meant you obviously had fairly substantial grades, did fairly well in what's called the LSAT, Law School Admission Test.
Yeah, so at that time, what was Michigan ranked? Because now it's...
Ranked 3rd.
Okay. Yeah, it's. I believe it's 4th. It depends on where you look.
Well, exactly.
But it's up there with... It's always up there with...
It's what we call the T14, the top 14 law schools.
Okay. Oh, the top 14, that's how they do it?
Yeah.
It's not like a top 10.
Right. It's called the T14. Don't ask me why.
Okay. What was your undergrad degree in?
History. I was a...
Did you know you were going to... No, because your father wanted you to be a doctor.
Correct. So I started as a pre-med student. After the first semester, I knew that ain't for me. I wasn't that interested in science. I loved history, political science, psychology, sociology, and most of all, philosophy.
So you really knew who you were since 8.
Well, I wouldn't quite phrase it that way. But
well,
let me put this down.
I mean, you knew that you didn't want to be a doctor.
Correct. That I was...
You knew what you liked.
I had actually planned... That has always fascinated me. The post-Civil War period between 1865 and 1917, when America was dramatically changing economically, politically, socially, in every, slavery had come to an end. It was just to me, a fascinating period in American history. But having said that, in my junior year, one of my roommates said, you ought to think about becoming a lawyer. I'll bet you'd be good at it. And what made me start thinking about it was all I've ever done my entire life was go to school. My dad taught in a medical school, although he was one of the chiefs of surgery in Kings County. My mother taught art and art weaving.
Oh, sorry.
At Mark Twain.
Yep, go ahead. Keep talking.
At Mark Twain Junior High. So one of my roommates said, you ought to think about going to law school.
Is it possible the 2 youths...
To what? What was that word?
What word?
To what?
What?
Did you say utes?
Yeah, 2 youths.
What is a ute?
Oh, excuse me, Your Honor. Two youths.
All I've ever done is go to school. My dad taught in medical school. My mother was a teacher. And he said, but if you want to go, you got to take the LSAT. I said, what's that? He said, the law school admission test. Anyway, I took it, did fairly well. Of course, when I was applying to law school.
No, wait, what is fairly well? Like how are they scored?
In those days, it was scored between 200 and 800. I got a 780.
Okay, 800 being the highest.
Yes.
Okay.
I was in the top 1 or 2%.
22%?
Up top 1 or 2%.
1 or 2%. Okay.
But there were no kids born essentially between 1941 and 1946 because of the war. I was born in 1939. So I was the recipient of the fact that it was much easier to get into good schools in those days.
Yes. So you were born in 1939. Was that considered the silent generation?
I have no idea what it was. But it was the end of the Depression era. I was a Depression era baby.
Okay.
I've now been alive for 10 decades.
Did you work when you were an undergraduate?
Yes.
And you're a wrestler too, right?
Yes.
Michigan wrestler.
Yes.
The greatest intercontinental champion. Nothing means nothing. I'm the cream of the crop. Hit you with an elbow drop. Dig it.
Yeah, well, I know. I pulled that picture up, and you were little hot tamale.
I wouldn't quite phrase it that way.
You were a lot of muscle going on there.
That was some muscle, yes.
Yeah. So you were always very disciplined.
I was very athletic. I loved athletics.
And how were you at wrestling? How did Michigan win the Big Ten at that time?
We won the Big Ten, and we finished either third or fourth in the Nationals. We were fairly good.
You must have been a damn good wrestler.
I actually had never wrestled until I got out to Michigan. And I grew up in Brooklyn. We didn't have wrestling.
So you just basically walked on?
What happened was this. We had a very good intramural sports program with a lot of sport.
Okay.
And they needed somebody to wrestle at a certain weight. And I volunteered to do it. So they showed me some moves, and I wound up winning my the intramural wrestling thing.
So that got everybody noticed.
So I was noticed by Cliff Keene, who was the wrestling coach. So I basically trained for my sophomore year and did it my last 2 years there.
Okay. And were you good?
I was okay. There were better wrestlers on the team than me.
But you hung in there.
Yes. The answer is I was fairly successful, but not as good as...
Was it fun?
You know, it was a lot of training. We trained then 3 hours a day. Now these kids train 4, 5, and 6 hours a day. The one thing that I do regret is that in order to get down to the weight that I wrestled at, in those days it was a natural 155, 160. Had I wrestled that weight, I would have been killed because all the people who wrestled at that weight were basically 180, 185. They were much bigger than I was. So we used to take amphetamines to reduce weight.
That's like unbelievable.
I know.
Well, I'm not surprised if they don't do that today.
My dad wrote the prescription, and I had the prescription filled at the Student Health Center, 5 cents a pill. I'd get 100 pills for $5.
100 pills for $5 of amphetamines.
And that's what they were originally designed for in the 50s.
So it wasn't illegal?
Oh, no. I had a prescription.
So it was like Dexatrim in the 70s.
Exactly correct.
Yeah, they used to sell them right at the counter at the ShopRite.
So, you take this crap, and you wouldn't eat for 12 hours. The thing that was nice, though, is...
So were you wired from it? Were you like walking around wired?
It certainly had its issues.
Yeah.
But fortunately, you could weigh in on Friday at 4 o'clock for a Saturday match at 6 o'clock. So I'd weigh in on Friday and probably put on 10 pounds Friday at 4 o'clock. And Saturday at 6.
Because you'd go eat. Where would you eat? Pizza House?
No, there was no Pizza Hut then, no Pizza House. The place that I used to love was called Crazy Jim's Blimpie Burger. Get these huge four, double meat, triple meat. I get these quadruple meats, 45 cents.
Oh, like a Big Mac almost, or a double Mac or whatever it's called.
But it was cooked right in front of you. It was really great. I still remember when I first got out there. I actually arrived the day before they were serving meals. So I asked somebody, where do you guys go to grab something to eat? said, "Oh, you got to go to Crazy Jim's Blimpie Burger." So I go around the corner to Crazy Jim's, who was then Jim himself was behind the counter. And
Was he crazy?
No, he was a nice guy, but I ordered triple meat, which cost 35 cents. So he said to me, "Do you want everything on it?" So I'm from Brooklyn. To me, everything on it meant ketchup and onions. Next thing you know, he's putting on lettuce, tomato, hot peppers. I said, "What are you doing?" I didn't ask for a garden salad.
What's this over here?
You never heard of grits?
Sure. I heard of grits. I just actually never seen a grit before.
Guy said, "Sir, you asked for everything on it." And anyway, you live and you learn, so that's the way they serve them.
Now, were there a lot of wrestlers on doing those amphetamines?
We all had our own way of losing weight. Some guys would go into the steam room wearing these garbage bags.
Oh, yeah.
Riding a bike in there, they'd come out, they'd be literally dripping.
Yeah, I love the steam room at the Y, where we met, actually.
Yeah.
Where Carl and I met.
So, everybody had their own technique. The one guy I didn't have to worry about was the heavyweight wrestler, because who's still alive. He's now 87.
And how old are you, Carl?
I'm 85 now.
Okay.
He was the starting left tackle on the football team. He now weighs, I saw him last year, he now weighs about 450 pounds.
Ooh.
I know. And he's in a wheelchair.
Oh,
One guy
that's
was
too
in a
bad.
wheelchair. I know.
So were there any, like Gerald Ford was a quarterback there.
No, he was the starting center.
But I thought he was a quarterback at
Harry
some
Newman
point.
was the quarterback. Gerald Ford was the center on the 32-33 national championship team.
Was he
was
32, 33? So was your dad there at that time?
No, he graduated 10 years earlier. He graduated in 26.
Okay, so you didn't...
When he was there, Benny Friedman, who was also an All-American quarterback, was the quarterback.
When your dad was there.
Yeah. So one of the great trivia questions is there have been 3 Jewish All-American quarterbacks. Name them. And the answer is, there was Sid Luckman, who went to Columbia, Harry Newman, who played at Michigan, and Benny Friedman, who played at Michigan.
Okay, can you hear us? Well, okay. All right. So our first game that we went, because my daughter has graduated from the University of Michigan too, and that's how Carl and I met. We had
The Beauteous Olivia.
Yes, T-shirts on. We went to the first parent, and I never had so much fun in my life. So did you have fun there? And another thing, how would you explain to someone who knows nothing about Michigan what the hype of the Go Blue is?
It's just a wonderful experience, and
so much fun.
The colors.
It's a great outlet too.
The colors of Michigan are maize and blue, and the battle cry when you go to a game is "Go Blue." So that's
Hail to the victors.
That's the fight song of the Michigan. I grew up with my dad singing "Hail to the victors," or "Sing to the colors that float in the light, hurrah for the yellow and blue, yellow the stars as they ride through the night and reel in a rollicking crew, yellow the fields where ripens the grain, and yellow the moon on the harvest wane. Hail, I want to go back to Michigan, to Deer and Arbor back to Joe's in the Orient, back to some of the money we spent. I want to go back." Anyway, these were songs that my dad used to sing to me when I was a kid, and I